everyone, and welcome back to Miss Slovak Storytime. Today I will be picking up where we left off with chapters 5 through 8 of Magic Treehouse number 3, Mummies in the Morning. If you have not listened to chapters 1 through 4, go back to the last video and be sure to listen. If you have your copy of the book, go ahead and grab it so you can read along with me. Chapter 5, The Ghost Queen. "A ghost!" Annie whispered. Jack could only stare in horror. The ghost began to speak. She spoke in a hollow, echoing voice. "I am Hutepi," she said, "Queen of the Nile. Have you come to help me?" Jack still couldn't speak. "Yes," said Annie. "For 1,000 years," said the Ghost Queen, "I have waited for help." Jack's heart was pounding so hard he thought he might faint. "Someone must find my Book of the Dead," she said. "I need it to go on to the next life." "Why do you need the Book of the Dead?" asked Annie. She didn't sound scared at all. "It will tell me the magic spells I need to get through the underworld," said the Ghost Queen. "The underworld?" said Annie. "Before I journey on to the next life, I must pass through the horrors of the underworld." "What kind of horrors?" Annie asked. "Poisonous snakes," said the Ghost Queen. "Lakes of fire, monsters, demons." "Oh." Annie stepped closer to Jack. "My brother hid the Book of the Dead so tomb robbers would not steal it," said the Ghost Queen. "Then he carved this secret message on the wall telling me how to find it." She pointed to the wall. Jack was still in shock. He couldn't move. "Where?" Annie asked her. "Here?" She squinted at the wall. "What do these tiny pictures mean?" The Ghost Queen smiled sadly. "Alas, my brother forgot my strange problem. I cannot see clearly that which is close to my eyes. I have not been able to read his message for thousands of years." "Oh, that's not strange," said Annie. "Jack has the same problem. That's why he wears glasses." The Ghost Queen stared in wonder at Jack. "Jack, lend her your glasses," said Annie. Jack took his glasses off his nose. He held them out to the Ghost Queen. She backed away from him. "I cannot wear your glasses, Jack," she said. "As you can see, I am made of air." "Oh, I forgot," said Annie. "But perhaps you will describe the hieroglyphs on this wall," said the Ghost Queen. "Hiero who?" said Annie. "Hieroglyphs," said Jack, finally finding his voice. "It's the ancient Egyptian way of writing. It's like writing with pictures." The Ghost Queen smiled at him. "Thank you, Jack," she said. Jack smiled back at her. He put his glasses on. Then he stepped toward the wall and took a good long look. "Oh, man," he whispered. Chapter 6, The Writing on the Wall. Jack and Annie squinted at the pyramid wall. A series of tiny pictures was carved into the stone. "There are 4 pictures here," Jack told the Ghost Queen. "Describe them to me, Jack. One at a time, please," she said. Jack studied the first picture. "Okay," he said. "The first one is like this." He made a zigzag in the air with his fingers. "Like stairs?" asked the Ghost Queen. "Yes, stairs," said Jack. "Just like stairs." She nodded. That was easy enough, Jack thought. He studied the second picture. "The second one has a long box on the bottom," he said. He drew it in the air. The Ghost Queen looked puzzled. "With 3 things on top like this," said Annie. She drew squiggly lines in the air. The Ghost Queen still seemed puzzled. "Like a hat," said Jack. "Hat?" said the Ghost Queen. "No, more like a boat," said Annie. "Boat?" said the Ghost Queen. She sounded excited. "Boat?" Jack took another look at the wall. "Yes, it could be a boat," he said. The Ghost Queen looked very happy. She smiled. "Yes, of course," she said. Jack and Annie studied the next picture. "The third one is like a thing that holds flowers," said Annie. "Or a thing that holds water," said Jack. "Like a jug?" said the Ghost Queen. "Exactly," said Jack. "Yes, a jug," said Annie. Jack and Annie studied the last picture. "And the last one looks like a pole that droops," said Annie. "Like a curved stick," said Jack, "but one side is shorter than the other." The Ghost Queen looked puzzled again. "Wait," said Jack. "I'll draw it in my notebook big so you can see it." Jack put down the scepter and got out his pencil. He drew the hieroglyph. "A folded cloth," said the Ghost Queen. "Really?" said Jack. "Yes, that is the hieroglyph for a folded cloth," said the Ghost Queen. "Oh, okay," said Jack. He looked at the fourth hieroglyph again. He still couldn't see the folded cloth. Maybe it was like a towel hanging over a bathroom rod. So that's all of them, said Annie. She pointed at each picture. Stairs, boat, jug, folded cloth. Jack wrote the words in his notebook. So what does the message mean? He asked the ghost queen. Come, she said. She held out her hand. Come to my burial chambers. And she floated away. Chapter 7. The Scroll. Jack put the scepter and his notebook and his pencil into his pack. The ghost queen seemed so kind and gentle, he wasn't afraid of her at all anymore. Jack and Annie followed her deeper into the pyramid. Finally, they came to some stairs. The stairs, said Jack and Annie together. The ghost queen floated up the stairs. Jack and Annie followed. The ghost queen floated right through a wooden door. Jack and Annie pushed on the door. It opened slowly. They stepped into a cold, drafty room. The ghost queen was nowhere in sight. Dim torchlight lit the huge room. It had a very high ceiling. On one side was a pile of tables, chairs, and musical instruments. On the other side of the room was a small wooden boat. The boat, said Jack. What's it doing inside Queen Hatepi's pyramid? Asked Annie. Maybe it's supposed to carry her to the next life, said Jack. Jack and Annie went over to the boat. They looked inside. The boat was filled with many things: gold plates, painted cups, jeweled goblets, woven baskets, jewelry with blue stones, and small wooden statues. Look, said Jack. He reached into the boat and lifted out a clay jug. The jug, said Annie. Jack looked inside the jug. Something's in here, he said. What is it? Asked Annie. Jack felt inside the jug. It feels like a big napkin, he said. The folded cloth, said Annie. Jack reached into the jug and pulled out the folded cloth. It was wrapped around an ancient-looking scroll. Jack slowly unrolled the scroll. It was covered with wonderful hieroglyphs. The Book of the Dead, whispered Annie. We found it. Oh, man, Jack traced his fingers over the scroll. It felt like very old paper. Queen Hatepi, called Annie. We have it. We found your Book of the Dead. Silence. Queen Hatepi! A door on the other side of the chamber creaked open. Maybe she's in there, said Annie. Jack's heart was pounding. Cold air was coming through the open doorway. Come on, said Annie. Wait. No, said Annie. She's waited thousands of years for her book. Don't make her wait any more. Jack put the ancient scroll into his backpack. Then he and Annie slowly started to cross the drafty room. They came to the open door. Annie went through first. Hurry, Jack, she said. Jack stepped into the other room. It was nearly bare except for a long gold box. The box was open. Its cover was on the floor. Queen Hatepi, called Annie. Silence. We found it, said Annie. Your Book of the Dead. There was still no sign of the ghost queen. The gold box glowed. Jack could barely breathe. Let's leave the scroll on the floor and go, he said. No, I think we should leave it in there, said Annie. She pointed to the gold box. No, said Jack. Don't be afraid, said Annie. Come on. Annie took Jack by the arm. They walked together across the room to the glowing gold box. They'd stopped in front of the box and peered inside. Chapter 8. The Mummy. A real mummy, Jack thought. Bandages were still wrapped around the mummy's skull, but most of the bandages had fallen away from the face. It was Hatepi, Queen of the Nile. Hatepi's mummy wasn't beautiful. It had broken teeth, wrinkled ears, and a squashed nose. Its flesh had withered, its eyes were hollow sockets. The rotting bandages on the mummy's body were coming off. Jack could see bones. Oh, gross, cried Annie. Let's go. No, said Jack. It's interesting. Forget it, said Annie. She started out of the room. Wait, Annie. Come on, Jack, hurry, cried Annie. She was standing by the door. Jack pulled out the Egypt book and flipped to a picture of a mummy. He read aloud. Ancient Egyptians tried to protect the body so it would last forever. First, it was dried out with salt. Ugh, stop, said Annie. Listen, said Jack. He kept reading. Next, it was covered with oil. Then it was wrapped tightly in bandages. The brain was removed by... Yuck! Stop! Cried Annie. Goodbye! She dashed out of the room. Annie! Called Jack. We have to give her the Book of the Dead! But Annie was gone. Jack reached into his pack. He pulled out the scroll and the scepter. He put them next to the mummy's skull. Was it just his imagination, or did a deep sigh seem to shudder through the room? Did the mummy's face grow calmer? Jack held his breath, and he backed out of the mummy room. He hurried through the boat room and headed down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, Jack heaved his own sigh, a sigh of relief. He looked down the hallway. It was empty. "Hey, Annie, where are you?" he said. No answer. Where in the world was Annie? Jack started down the hallway. "Annie," he called. Had she run out of the pyramid? Was she already outside? "Annie!" "Help, Jack!" came a cry. The voice sounded far away. It was Annie. Where was she? "Help, Jack! Annie!" Jack started to run along the shadowy hallway. "Help, Jack!" Her cry seemed fainter. Jack stopped. He was running away from her voice. "Annie!" he called. He went back toward the burial chambers. "Jack!" Her voice was louder. "Jack!" Jack climbed the stairs. He went back into the boat room. He looked around at the furniture, the musical instruments, and the boat. Then he saw it. There was another door. It was right next to the door he had just come through. The other door was open. Jack dashed through it. He found himself at the top of some stairs. They were just like the stairs outside the other door. He went down the stairs and into the hallway. It was lit by torches on the wall. It was just like the other hallway. "Annie!" he called. "Jack! Annie! Jack!" Annie was running through the hallway toward him. She crashed into him. "I was lost!" she cried. "I think this is one of those false passages built to fool the tomb robbers," said Jack. "A false passage," said Annie, panting. "Yeah, it looks just like the other hallway," said Jack. "We have to go back into the boat room and out the right door." Just then they heard a creaking noise. Jack and Annie turned around. They looked up the stairs. They watched in horror as the door slowly creaked shut. A deep sound rumbled into the distance, and all the torches went out. Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow along for the next video. Bye!